That's a good shot.
So, Kodak Ektachrome, what's the big deal?
In terms of historical value,
Okay.
quite a bit. So Ektachrome was made in the early 40s until it was discontinued in 2013. And it's been used for tons of magazines. It was like a staple for Playboy.
Okay.
Not that we've ever seen that.
Nope.
And then it was also used for National Geographic, which we are very well familiar with.
Yep.
And then also it was used for NASA for a lot of
okay.
their shoots.
All
So speaking of NASA, it was the film that Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong brought to the moon. They brought some specialized custom versions of Ektachrome as their color film.
Okay. Fit
So
for
that-
space.
Yes.
Wow.
So all those moon shots you see, those are all Kodak Ektachrome. Film nowadays, you always hear that companies are discontinuing film. Like you hear like Fuji's always cutting
Fuji,
something.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
Fuji's
gone.
always cutting something. So then this is one of the first times that a big company like Kodak or Fuji has brought something back. So
Okay.
symbolically, that's a pretty big thing. In terms of practical use, well, that's what we're kind of here to figure out today. That's why I brought you down from space to test this.
All right.
Because we need to
Okay.
find out if it's still worth shooting slide film in 2018. And it's supposed to be, in terms of the film, it's supposed to be, Kodak describes it kind of like a sharp, low grain, good color,
Okay.
I think low contrast film.
So since you told me that they brought this film to the moon, I thought I would bring you here to this weird alien place to take some photos. How does that sound?
That sounds pretty good. This is actually Hong Kong. It's one of the secret spots if you ignore all the tourists in the background
And the wedding photography.
and the wedding photography.
Yeah.
It's like a top 5 wedding photography spot.
For sure.
Yes.
For sure.
But then it's also like another planet.
So, Ian, what kind of astronaut are you?
They call me the Coin Man.
All right, cool man. Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. I explore space with my, like a rocket, you know, like I shoot off like this. Derek's having a philosophical moment right now. All right, so right now we're getting the part where he's just crashed and he's clinging on to life. He's somehow made it to this alien planet and there's a wedding going on. As we lost light, I could only lower my shutter speed or keep it high and underexposed. Since I was using a 35mm lens, I gambled with 1/15 in hopes an image would come out sharp. From 1941 to 2013, Kodak released dozens of types of Ektachrome. Some were 64 speed, some were 200 speed, one was 1600 speed. And in 2014, I shot the last roll of what I had of Ektachrome 160T, which was a tungsten type film. I cross-processed it, and it's totally different from all the other ones. But basically, Kodak had a lot of types of Ektachrome. The only one that matters, though, is the 100 speed one. What we have today is E100, and it's based off the very old Ektachrome 100G.
I think this is the closest we've been.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
So we're on board Apollo 90. We're looking for these white, futuristic, spacey background, and this is the perfect place, I would say.
Yes. The problem is, though, we're using slide film, which has a very narrow latitude of exposure, so we have to get the exposure perfectly correct,
Okay.
or else we're going to overexpose the backgrounds against our white suits.
Sure.
So it's going to be tricky,
Yep.
but we can do it.
Yep, we can.
So making Derek's shirt look good was difficult because it was a very cheap costume. So we tried to match it against these strong lines and shadows, and in certain cases like this one, when it's kind of like all white and minimalist, then we try to make it white on white. This hat is pretty hot, actually.
Think about the body.
That's true. So then the helmet actually covers my massive brain.
Your massive cone head.
Yeah.
That's why mine's like flat.
Because you're human.
Yours is huge.
Right. So we're on the same spaceship, but I'm like,
But you're not human.
then I do like weird alien things.
War of the Worlds. That shit.
No, I want your Murph face.
Don't let me leave, Murph!
Okay. Try for F4. Try for F4 250. So right now we got Derek in a perfect position. He is the astronaut heading out into the great unknown. The problem is that we have a very high contrast situation, and if this were color negative, the film could probably capture the highlights and the shadows instead of detail in both. Since we're shooting slide, which has such a narrow exposure latitude as we talked about before, we might have to use a relatively old technique that is obviously still very valid now. It's called bracketing. It's like photography 101, basically where you shoot one picture, proper exposure, one over and one under. You don't really need it that much of digital because you can save so much stuff in post now, but with slide, we probably gotta do it for this shot. So I'm gonna shoot one straight on, exposing for him, one exposing for the shadows, and one exposing for the highlights. That's good.
Alright, let me know when.
Okay. So in our film, this is the part where you're boarding the spaceship
Okay.
and you're about to take off, and then you're thinking of how you're never going to see Earth again, right? And your loved ones.
Okay.
So it's like sad face number 3. That's good. That's good. That's really sad.
Mission sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower clear.
For me, the hope is that perhaps with this small step forward by Kodak, there can be a giant leap for film. That Fujifilm, inspired by Kodak's success in Ektachrome, will not only stop discontinuing films, but also maybe even bring back some old emotions. The hope is that with Ektachrome, we can say Kodak is back, that they are pioneers once again, bringing us into the great unknown. But I have to say that honestly, I wish the Ektachrome was a little more distinctive because I want more of you out there to buy it. My own fear is that the film is not iconic enough, but I'm even more afraid that film will die out, especially without the support of the community. So even though I'm personally not the biggest fan of Ektachrome, I want you guys to try it out for yourselves. Because the only way that we can keep film alive is to support the companies that make it. And if our children can so happily discover the joys of Kodak or Fujifilm in the years to come, well, wouldn't that be the greatest gift of all?
And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
You know, like when Stanley Kubrick faked the moon landing?
No. What?